photograph of a favourite tree of mine growing in the park across the road. Some years ago I did a picture of this and I'll show it to you now. It's always been a favourite picture of mine. I don't know why, I just like it. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to have another go at painting this. You can see here that these brush strokes here are quite dabby. It's working well. You've got the darks and the lights, so there's some form in the foliage. But the brush strokes are quite dabby and quite different from the dry brush strokes that I've been doing in the last 1 or 2 videos that I've been making, and I'll put links to those in the description box below. So I'm going to have another go at this picture. I'm going to do it slightly differently, and I'm going to combine the dry brush work for grasses, and again I've got a recent video that you can look at, and I'm going to combine this dry grass work here, and I'm going to use the dry brush work in the tree. I rather like this photograph as well that I took last year of the bluebells. I thought I might incorporate this nice contrast with the background and these foreground bluebells and the little daisies with the tree, so that instead of doing the thistles, which were in the original photograph, maybe I'll put some bluebells in here and the little daisies. So we'll see how we get on. So this is my drawing of the tree that I'm going to paint. I went to have a look at the tree to get some idea of how the structure of the branches went, because from the photograph that I took, as you can see, I've really only got the base of the tree here, the bottom half of it. So I went and had a look and figured out that this was sort of the way it was growing, and that makes it a bit easier for me when I come to do the painting. I've put some masking fluid on, not very much, just a few dots of masking fluid for the daisies. I'm going to put some of the sky on first, where it's sort of peeking through the foliage, and then, as I've sort of said before, I'm going to put the lightest colour on of the foliage for the tree, and I'm going to sort of think where that's going to go. And then I'm going to put some of the blue. Where else might it be? Somewhere like that. There might be a little bit peeking through, but I've not left much space there, have I? Try and get a little bit more of a dry brush down here, where there might be some odd leaves. So this is raw sienna, and this is going to stand for the lightest leaves in this picture. I have said this before, I've got a video, the link is below, on painting trees. If you want to keep a nice transparent look to the watercolour, you can't put these light colours over the blue, so you couldn't put your blue sky and then put your yellow over the top of it, because you would lose the transparency and the lightness of the lightest light. So you have to, well, I think you have to work like this in order to keep the transparency there. So I could let that dry. In fact, I'll probably let it dry a little while, and I'll mix up another green. So I'm going to use 3 tones of green probably. This is going to be my lightest. I know it's yellow, but that's going to stand for my lightest green. And then I'm going to add a little bit of Prussian blue to this, to make it a little bit greener. And then with the brush on its side, we can get this dry brush effect. So we've got this other colour coming in. I'm not planning this too much. We'll just see what happens. Sometimes it's better just to go for it and don't think too much. That doesn't always work, of course. So these are my two greens going on here. I am doing a dry brush, but as you can see, it's blending quite a lot. So I might let it dry a little bit more before I put the final green on there. So I think some of the bluebells will be down here. And again, I'm using the dry brush here. We're just suggesting the bluebells. We're not going to be painting the individual flowers. But I think the dry brush does sort of give a nice bitty sort of effect for flowers. I'm using ultramarine here with a touch of dioxazine violet, make it a bit purpley. And again, I'm putting these bluebells onto white paper, so that's going to keep the colour nice and fresh and transparent. So I don't want to overdo it, so I think we'll leave it like that. And the foreground grasses here I'm going to try and keep quite yellow. I'm doing that because I'm looking at the little picture I got with the bluebells, and I'm thinking I could put some darker green shadows coming across there. So as you can see, I'm not trying to copy one particular picture. What I try to do, and I struggle, I know, because I think like most people, we really do want to copy a picture. I want to try and take ideas from a picture and then develop it. Be a bit creative, put my own ideas in there, rather than strictly copying it. So I've mixed up a darker green now. I've got to decide where I'm going to put it. I quite like some light here, I think. We could think about a light source maybe coming from the left. And then we might have some shadow, some darker colours underneath some of these. What you want to try and do is not have everything looking very samey, so we want some patches left light and some darker. And maybe we'll leave it lighter this side if that's where the light's coming from. So again, this mix is certainly drier. You can see that. I'm dotting around a bit with it. Trying not to keep my brush strokes all the same way. And these could stand for bits of leaves away from the main foliage here. As I said, I don't want it to look too samey. Maybe we'll have some blocked in here, a bit darker down here. We can always add a bit more foliage later when we've got the branches in. I've left a few white bits showing this time, not particularly by design, it's just happened. So it's knowing when to stop really, isn't it? Now this darker green I've mixed with the Prussian blue, the burnt sienna and the raw sienna still. So now I've got to decide how much grass to put in here. So we use some dry brush strokes and put some of this grass in here. I don't want to overdo it. It does need something in here. There's always a temptation to leave. You think, oh, that's looking nice, I'll leave it. But really, that did look quite nice, but it really does need something else in here. It wouldn't just be like that. Just bring the changes a bit, make this green a little bit browner maybe in here. I like to work quite spontaneously. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I do like to work quite freely and loosely, and you have to take chances. Sometimes things work better than others. But I like to do quite a lot. I like to paint a lot, do lots of attempts at things and take some chances rather than spending hours just potching around on one painting, possibly getting nowhere with it. It's only a piece of paper. Don't be frightened of it. I'm going to let that dry. I think possibly this could be a little bit darker, but we'll see when we get the trunk and the branches in we'll see how it's looking. I really like these, well, I think they're little shoots of a tree coming up here, aren't they? I really like those and the dark grasses. So I'm having a go with the rigger on doing these. And again, I'm being quick and hopefully a bit expressive with them. Sometimes I'm too quick. I could do with taking my time. Maybe I'm putting a bit more thought into it. But it's the way I like to paint, and if it doesn't come together I can do it again. So I'm just putting some of these in here. Don't want them too uniform. I want them to look a little bit different. They're coming more like that, aren't they? Should have practiced these first, really. The stem, and they're coming out like that, something like that, aren't they? What I'm going to do now is put a bit more shadow underneath them. Because they're so dark, they'd be growing out of some dark grass. I don't want to lose the bluebells. See how that's going. We've still got the blue. Can always add a bit more. Is that looking all right? It's looking quite messy. I like messy. It's looking a little bit too messy, is it? I don't know. The blue is disappearing. The blue is disappearing. Oh dear. I'm using burnt sienna and ultramarine for the darks. I don't like the way that's running. It's cauliflowering a bit, which is okay in some situations, but I don't really want it cauliflowering on the tree. It might be dark enough, but if you remember, watercolour dries back at least 40%, so you really have to think about that when you wanted to get your nice darks in there. And then what you've got to do is think about how these branches are intertwining. Again, I don't like to be too careful. Try and make your brush strokes expressive. But the whole structure of the tree has got to make sense, hasn't it? So everything's got to link up. And this trunk has got to be thick enough, sturdy enough to support the rest of the tree. What you're going to do now is intertwine. You've got your structure of your branches from your drawing, and then you've got to think of some ways of just painting so that the branches are intertwining in between the leaves. I'm going to have to turn this round, I think, to do this bit here. There's not usually a lot of the branches showing. It's looking a little bit too dark for my liking, those. A little bit too much blue maybe in the mix. So I'll put a bit more brown in now. See how that goes. Looking a bit black, aren't they? I'll put a bit of brown in there. That's the trouble. Ultramarine and burnt sienna, if you've got too much blue in there, you can make a black, and you don't really want a black when you're doing this. See where we're going to put this. see here as well. You can, if you just go back from it and have a look, you can see where it's not working. And then you've got the little twigs that can come on as well. Don't want to overdo it, but you do want some on there. This is bothering me here because I've got this trunk here and then I've got branch here and I've nothing here. This is going to go up here, isn't it? See if this would work, see if this makes sense. Well, I hope so, because I've got so far with this picture. I don't really want to mess it up now. Is that looking as if it's working? There's that trunk there. There's that there. That's coming out there. Yes, maybe. Yeah, this is looking, this needs to be a bit browner. It's making a pattern, isn't it, that works tonally and makes sense. It's making a pattern that sort of works. So when you look at it, you can imagine that this tree is real and is really growing and makes sense, as I said. This has gone funny again here. To make it a bit darker. See how that's looking. Might be some bits of the trunk showing through. There might be some bits of the trunk showing through there. Still bothering me a bit there because this is so thick, and then I'm going, as we tend to do, quite thin there. Sometimes the best thing to do if you're struggling with an area is to work somewhere else and then go back to it. So I'm mixing up a bit more of my dark, and then I think I'll put a few sort of twigs coming down here. We don't want too many, but we don't want too many. I'm going to try and get it right. Now then, is that working there? Are they in front of that? Is that working? Are they coming in front? Yeah, I think so. I think so. Okay. So I'm fairly happy with that, except for this bit here. I'll leave it a little bit longer and then decide what I'm going to do. I think I did lose more blue than I wanted to there. What I think I might do is just put some pure ultramarine in some places. Yeah, I think that'll work. Just to liven it up a little bit. And we've got some white bits here, so I can put some blue in there. That gives it a bit more colour, doesn't it? I can put it through here as well. Mixing up a little bit more green. See if I can do, I love doing a bit of splattering in places. I'm not too happy about the trunk. I think it's looking a little bit boring. So I think I might just pull a few bits out and then add some more darks to it just to make it a bit more interesting. It's looking a bit dull and samey, isn't it? Well, when I say it's looking dull and samey, it's the same tone. There's not much light and shade. I think the side away from the light could do with being a lot darker. and the side nearer the light could be lighter. Had a bit more interest in there. See what we think when I've done that. There could be some sort of roots there as well. That might look a bit better. What shall I do up here? I wish I hadn't put that there now. That might have been better. Something not quite right. It's bugging me. Oh, that might be better. I don't know why. It seems like these are just too hard-edged or something there. Maybe if they were softer. Oh, it's too light, isn't it? Blast. Blast, blast, blast. I think what I'm going to do is take those out altogether. Take those out altogether. They can just go. That's probably better. And then when it's a little bit drier, I'll put some more raw sienna in there. The only thing I might do now is just put a few sort of twiggy things growing up here. Break up this space a little bit. So, as you can tell from my ramblings and a bit of indecisiveness, I've not practiced this. This is my thought process when I'm painting. Painting is not easy. Painting is not easy. It does take a lot of thought. I'm going to let that dry totally, and then I'm going to rub the pencil marks out, and then I'm going to put some of this yellow on there. And I'm going to pull. Remember, in watercolour you can pull out. I'm not just potching about here. You can pull out as well as put in. So if you wanted to put some highlights on, you want to clean your brush, dab it on some tissue to dry it, and then pull out as well as putting in. So I rubbed off the pencil lines, and looking at it now, I'm just going to put in one or two more twiggy things. I think they might go something like that. I've still got this problem, I know. And can we afford to go a bit darker under here, on this side? It's constantly adjusting when you're painting. It's not as easy in watercolour to constantly adjust, but with practice you'll see that you can. There are ways of adjusting in watercolour. And lifting out is always very useful too, which people quite often don't realise. It's easier to adjust as you go along with something like acrylics and oils than it is with watercolour, I must admit. if you do too much adjusting with the watercolour, it can get muddy. But I've not been happy with this trunk at all. Sometimes things come together straight away and you think, oh, that's right, that's good. And other times things can be a bit of a struggle. But if you keep your paper wet, you can lift out. You can lift out almost back to the paper sometimes. I'm just feeling this needs the strength in there. And also standing up and looking at this, it needs some darker greens in here to stand for the shadow that the tree is casting. And if we go back and have a look at this picture here, if you look at the difference in tones between the light and the dark, there's a very big difference there, isn't there? And I'm getting mine more of a mid-tone here. It could do with something really dark going through there. Not to mention that little bit there. I don't know what I'm going to do about that. Anyway, I shall mix up a darker green and put it along here. What I'm going to do is put some, get rid of this sort of white of the paper. Put a bit more yellow on there. And because I'm doing it there, I'm just going to put it in another few places as well. And hopefully that might work. Just going in with the odd dark here and there, just to ring the changes a bit on the tones. These things are very subtle, but to your eye, if it makes you feel happier, then go ahead. Do a little bit of sort of potching about like this. I think that's sort of working all right now. It's looking like this is a big clump of leaves totally covering whatever's going on under there. What I'm also going to do finally, I think, is put a little bit more foliage up here, because they're not looking as if they're going out of the picture. This foliage here. Remember, the tree is growing a lot higher than we've painted it, so we need something up there. So we have a bit of masking fluid to remove. These were the little daisies, weren't they? Seem to have lost those. I think the only thing left to do with this now really is to maybe just put a little, these are too stark, put a bit of blue on those there. Seem to have lost the daisies, we won't worry too much about that. Turn them into bluebells. There we go. I think we'll call that a day. So the picture's looking about finished now. I did a little bit of extra splattering on the foliage here, and things are always helped if you put a mount around them. I hope you found this a useful video for painting foliage and grasses using the dry brush technique. If you did enjoy it, you could give me a thumbs up and maybe subscribe to my channel.